Sometimes these episodes are uncomfortable even for us to listen to.
You're listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, where HIPAA and humor collide to make learning fun. Your delightful hosts are Donna Grindle and David Sims. Relax, HIPAA help is on the way.
This is Jeremy from Oral Facial Implant Specialist in Deer Park, Illinois, and you are listening to Help Me with HIPAA podcast.
Thank you for that intro. I am David Sims of HIPAA for MSPs and Security First IT, and joining me is Donna Grindle of Carden. Good morning, Donna.
Good morning, David.
Oh.
Is that better?
You had more coffee than I did.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how it's supposed to be now that you're looking at me.
I know. I'm not the only one looking at you.
I'm looking at you, man.
Looking at you. Everybody's looking at you because now we're posting these on YouTube. So you get to see all the crazy faces we make at each other. That's always the fun part.
Yeah, some things still have to be edited out. But
yeah.
Yes.
Well, I try not to edit too much of it out. Let people see all the craziness that goes on.
Yeah, it won't match the podcast audio. So if you want to see a different version, go check it out on YouTube. It's official. This is the second episode. So starting at 280, I gave in. All right.
Yep.
So
it's the recorded live version. All right. So today we're going to dive into an episode and talk about vendors being included in breach lawsuits because, just because the story isn't about healthcare and HIPAA doesn't mean it doesn't offer some important news about healthcare to note. And so we're going to talk about those things. And
we'll mix in healthcare too, just stick with us because it'll all tie together in the end.
It sure will. Absolutely will. So before we dive into all that though, let's make the official announcement about the HIPAA Bootcamp.
All right, you going to do like a big thing? No.
I don't have anything
Not with
to
your,
do that with.
You don't have your drum roll or big intro on your the cricket.
This is all I have.
That's the way we do it. Everybody be quiet. So
there's a big announcement. Shh.
HIPAA Bootcamp 2021. Number 1. We're going to try to do 2 because this is number 1. February 23rd to the 25th. And it will be virtual because we ain't crazy. We're not going to try to do something in person, not in February. Then we'll probably plan another virtual one for later in the year, somewhere in the fall. I think we're throwing around August. So there you go. Sign up now. Hopefully by the time you hear this, it will be on the website.
Yep. And just so you know, this is not a webinar. This is an interactive event. It's you are taking part in this. It's not just listening to me and Donna talk like it is on the podcast.
It's remote learning.
Yeah, it is. And
it's a class.
And the Carden team's done a fantastic job of putting together things that get you involved and fun little games and other things. There's a whole kit that you'll get to participate and go along with everything. So I think it's a good time. Yeah,
we've taken the input from the group that, did our first trial, and we're trying some new things. So, we always do the best we can to incorporate input and make it better. So we'll see how it goes, but if you have any questions, let us know. It'll all be on the website, the
HIPAAbootcamp.com. Yep, go check it out. I think it'll be great.
All right. Sounds good then. See you then.
Yep, we'll be there with bells on.
Yeah. Okay, then. And you ready?
So thanks to absolutely ready. Okay. So thanks to our vendors and our donors. If you're a vendor and you want to donate, let me know.
Yeah.
So, so we'll jump into the topic of today right after this break. Does your business work with medical practices? As a medical practice business associate, do you realize that if you have access to patient information, you have to follow the same HIPAA rules as your client? Call Carden today at 678-292-5001 so they can assess your privacy and security practices to help ensure you are protected and prepared. Visit cardenhq.com to learn more.
2/3 of small businesses that experience a cybersecurity breach end up closing their doors within 6 months. Cyber criminals are targeting your practice and coming after your most sensitive data. Visit us online and schedule a time to talk about what you can do to protect yourself, your patients, and your practice. Our website is securityfirstit.com. That's securityfirstit.com.
All right. So we're going to get into our newly appointed session that we've now got. So welcome to the HIPAA
Say what?
segment of the week. All right. So OCR, as they do, Donna's already going, no, don't do it. As OCR often does, they know that we record on Friday. So yesterday they released the 11th investigation as to the HIPAA Right of Access Initiative. So I think by now we should say they ain't playing around.
No.
This one is interesting though, because it specifically mentions a doctor.
The doctor is a private practice by themselves.
Right.
Dr. Rajendra Bayani, I believe I am not butchering that, in Regal Park, New York, has agreed to take corrective actions and pay $15,000 to settle a potential violation. Remember, that's what they call it when they do the settlements. It's a potential violation.
Mm-hmm.
It's not a civil money penalty. But there are some interesting differences in this one. First of all, it's a single doctor. So all of the, nobody's going to care what I do because I'm too small, pay attention.
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, it's just like the others where we tell folks, OCR is going to come knocking on your door, statistically more likely to hear from them due to a patient complaint. They take, I think they said 28,000 patient complaints in the last year or so. I mean, it's huge numbers, or maybe, I don't know, thousands of those.
Mm-hmm.
Then there's hundreds of data breaches over 500 that guarantees you an investigation. So statistically, there you go. And this is what happened in September 2018. OCR gets a complaint from a patient who says, Dr. Bayani is not supplying the records that I requested in July. Then OCR calls and says, hey, now, this is what you're supposed to do. Because that first call, that's what they do. This is what you're supposed to do. And, they, we'll take care of it. And then July 2019, they receive a second complaint from the patient. That's not good. That's not good. A second complaint it's never a good idea, because that means they still haven't gotten the records. And they said, what up? And they did an investigation. And finally, September 2020, so 2 years after it started, the patient finally got a complete copy of their medical records. Yeah, so throw in there Roger's statement.
Yeah, so Roger Severino, OCR director, says doctors' offices, large and small, must provide patients their medical records in a timely fashion. We will continue to prioritize HIPAA rights of access cases and enforcement until providers get the message.
So, yeah. I mean, I just did a webinar for Georgia MGMA to try to educate folks about how important it is to pay attention to what they're saying. Because most people, they're too busy reading, 50,000 other things and they don't notice these.
Mm-hmm.
But I did, what you expect, the normal stuff, the corrective action plan, all of that kind of stuff, all pretty, standard of what we've been seeing on these cases. But it didn't note one thing. They said that Dr. Bayani failed to provide the complainant with a copy of her medical records and failed to respond to OCR's August 2nd, 2019 and October 22nd, 2019 correspondence requesting data, which explains item B in their following covered conduct issues. They failed to cooperate with OCR's complaint investigation.
Yeah, that's never good.
No.
Never good.
No.
If I ignore them, they'll go away.
Yeah. You are not the boss of me.
They will not go away if you ignore them.
That only makes them more angry, you know?
Yeah.
So,
or like I hear some people sometimes, they're like, this is my practice. The government's not going to tell me what to do. Well, yeah, they will.
yeah, but your patients still have rights.
I know. And these are civil rights, mind you.
Yeah. Civil rights. And that's what it's all about is, you know, my right to privacy, my right to participate in my health care. Mm-hmm. And it's not about other things. So let's focus on that. But that is what the thing that we will reiterate. The HIPAA says that you should provide patients with access to their records. And by the way, HIPAA also says you should cooperate in any investigation.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So if you haven't done what we've repeatedly brought up to go audit the way that you are doing medical records, audit and retrain and check all your policies and procedures. If you haven't done that, now's the time. So there you go.
Yeah. I mean, you would think that, at least for me, I'd be calling OCR and throwing myself at the mercy of them right off the bat, taking them out to lunch and dinner. And what can I do to make what can I do to make this so easy for you so that you go away happy?
I promise I'm trying. And, you know, that's really not cooperating with them. What they want to see is that you're trying to do the right thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and that you'll make adjustments when they tell you, well, you're actually not doing the right thing. We would like for you to do this. That's what they want to see you do. And all the people that are like, I'm just not going to pay attention to you, blatantly says, I'm not trying to do the right thing.
Yeah. I don't care. I don't care what you say.
Yeah. So there you go.
Yeah. So anyway, hopefully he'll get the picture, and maybe those that are nearby his practice, you know, I'm sure he'll be talking to people. The big bad OCR.
Well, he or her. I do not know the gender of the physician.
That's true. That is true. It doesn't say.
So let's not assume. I got to keep you in line there, brother.
Yeah. I was trying to see if it said anything in there that gave mention of that, but it doesn't. It does say the complainant was a her. Mm-hmm. But anywho, that is true.
Yeah. So we'll just go with they.
All right. We'll go with they.
Yeah, there you go. Good job. I'm going to educate you yet.
I just assume.
I know. We know about assume.
I assume that in some I'll say it this way, and it won't be popular, but I'll say it anyway. The times I've heard personally people say HIPAA schmippa, it is 100% of the time being the male doctor, not a female doctor. Female doctor seems to take it a lot more seriously.
Well, okay, that's fair.
In my personal experience, you don't get the pushback when it's the female. You get a little bit of a concern, and you don't get the poking of the chest out as much. So anyway.
Yeah, I'm not going to go down that path though, but I can tell you, I've heard the female doctors yelling in the background, "If you make them put a password on it, I'm taking it off as soon as you leave." Okay, as long as I don't have the liability. Everybody heard that, right? Okay.
Yeah, that's true.
Speaking of liability, let's get into that.
Yeah, vendors included in the breach lawsuits. So.
Yeah, there's been a lot of stuff coming out about non-healthcare situations where there's data breaches. And also I wanted to bring up the FTC, because I don't think a lot of people realize that the FTC can also get involved in healthcare cases.
Yeah.
You know, if it's considered fraud or any of these other things, and they have gotten involved in healthcare cases. Now, this particular situation is all about Zoom and the madness that took place, because Zoom's like, we're we're doing our thing, we're growing, and then all of a sudden, boom, we're growing exponentially, and everybody's all up in our stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. And I don't know about you, but if I had $1 for every question I got about Zoom since then, geez, people are emailing me all the time. What's happening to Zoom? Should I be using it? Is it safe to use?
How do I do this? Can you do this?
What about all this stuff in the news? And we'll talk about some of this, but my feeling is that, yes, they dropped the ball. Mm-hmm. Yes, they did some things that were questionable. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, I think the safest time to use the product is probably now. It's kind of like, you know what? The safest I am ever being as a driver is right after I get a speeding ticket.
That, or, if your teenager who's just gotten the license is in the car, maybe then.
Yeah. Yeah. So now Zoom has got so many people in their business that I think now is probably you're safer now than you were before.
And they've been fairly transparent too, because all of this stuff happened like they didn't drag it out with lawsuits. They didn't drag it out, with I'm not going to pay attention, because this is being settled now from, we all know when it all started.
Yeah. Yeah, it's quick.
And they also settled with New York State right away. We screwed up. Here's what we're doing. We're going to fix it. And that part, to me, is one of the most valuable ones.
Yeah, it is, because you and I know that every service, especially when you're talking about software as a service, they all have vulnerabilities. They all have things that are going on. Sometimes it's unknown. Sometimes it's absolutely known, and people are hiding it. We talked about EHR vendors doing that.
Yep.
So to have a company that comes out and says, yes, we made a mistake, or we missed something, or we have vulnerabilities, whatever, but here's how we're addressing those things.
Yeah.
Instead of just going, oh, no, what you're talking about, or trying to hide it or whatever, that to me, that says a lot.
Yeah.
Because I could point to another company that does the same thing as Zoom and say, well, they've never had a problem. It might not be they don't have a problem. It might be that they're not telling anybody they have a problem.
Oh yeah, they're hiding it.
Yep.
And we know it happens. So it's not this could happen. We know it does happen.
Oh yeah.
And the question is, if you stand up and say, look, we messed up, we didn't do this right, we're going to fix it. That's the kind of business I would rather be dealing with in the environment that we're in from a security standpoint than one who doesn't. I love the fact that, if a lot of companies, Google will give you a whole dissertation on what happened if there's a problem on the network. And you can go read all the details. At this time, this happened. Then at this time. And you're basically reading every detail of why there was any downtime or slow time, any of those things. If you want to go read those, they're not fiction. They don't have a lot of good rhythm. But I like that kind of response. And clearly, Zoom as a company has done that, and they continue to commit to it. So that in their settlement with New York, with the FTC said, okay, after you've done this, they settle without a financial requirement, but they make it clear, we don't want to come back and see you none.
We will bring back, we'll bring an invoice with us.
Yeah. For each violation, it'll be $43,280. And we know how they calculate that. So the FTC has that, but here's the things that they agree to do, the steps that they want them to take. Assess and document on an annual basis any potential internal and external security risk and develop ways to safeguard against such risk. Sound familiar?
Sounds very familiar. Step 1 and 2.
There you go. Let's do a risk analysis and a risk management plan. Hello? Implement a vulnerability management program. Sound familiar?
Also, sounds familiar.
Deploy safeguards such as multi-factor authentication to protect against unauthorized access to its network, institute data deletion controls, and take steps to prevent the use of known compromised user credentials. Sounds pretty familiar too, all the things we would do. Require Zoom personnel to review any software updates for security flaws and ensure the updates will not hamper third-party security features. Okay, all of that that last bit is what I am advising all of the software companies that I work with. The software companies I work with are the ones that, I'm like, you guys need to have your own SecDevOps plan, whatever you want to call it. But there has to be our network security that we're supposed to do under HIPAA, but you need to have a security protocol for managing your software.
Yeah.
If your GitHub account gets hacked and somebody makes a change and no one notices it, and then you send malware out to everybody the next day, or they're able to, add a little bitty, piece of information into the back end of your software that's a cloud app, it's going to happen. So you got to lock that stuff down. And I loved it that it was pretty clear, straightforward. You can read the details. But the important thing is they're only requiring them to do what you're supposed to do under HIPAA.
Yeah.
That's why we say it's not like healthcare is out there having to do something different than everybody else. It's just saying your data needs to be protected. Here's how you go about it.
Yeah. It's all, well, not all, most of it is the exact same thing every business should be doing.
Yeah.
You know, it's not, this HIPAA thing, this HIPAA. It's the same thing everybody's got to be doing. That's why we keep saying that when there becomes this big federal privacy and security law, it's going to be HIPAA for everybody.
Yeah. I mean, the only big difference between HIPAA and what a lot of these others, that are outside of that have to do is things like the business associate agreement. Well, you know what? The problems in the supply chain are making people do basically those things that are in the business associate agreement in their agreements. They just don't call it a business associate agreement.
Right. Yeah. No, I think that the general businesses will start taking a cue from HIPAA on that.
Yeah, that's why a lot of folks that they know they need to be secure, so they come to us and say, "Look, you have to do HIPAA. That's the closest thing we got to this. Can you make sure we're covered with GDPR or CCPA or whatever?" If you make that your foundation, and again, HIPAA's the floor.
Yeah.
Make that your foundation, but expand it out just a little bit to include the NIST CSF things, and we've kind of plug those in to build that broader foundation, and you can do these things. So know that it is coming.
Yep. Yeah, it is.
All right. So
it's interesting. I have a prospect that I sent a thing to the other day. I actually sent them some information from 405D stuff. Like here's your top 5 threats. Start here. And so the lady's like, "Well, I've been working with the local small business administration. They're doing like a cybersecurity program." And I'm like, "Okay, considering you just had a breach, how long have you been working with them?" And she's like, "Well, clearly I am not doing well with it, or the information they're providing is not that good. I don't know which." And so she emails me back yesterday and she says, "The Small Business Administration wants you to review their checklist and give them your opinion." I was like,
nice.
Okay. I don't know what
great
conversation.
News, brother.
I know. It's like, I don't know what conversation transpired for that to happen. But
right, can't you hear it? David Sims says, "You're not protecting me."
I don't know what's going on, but all I said was, you're going through these classes and you're doing these things they're telling you to do, and yet you still had a breach, and and it was something that could have easily been prevented.
Oh, well, we look forward to hearing what your opinion is on the SBA checklist.
I can tell you just checklist in general, my opinion would be.
Right? It's a checklist.
But
that's why we have such an opinion we do about simply using checklists. Checklists should be documentation, not your program.
Yeah. My response is going to be, show me a framework, not a checklist.
Yeah. There's plenty of options. Basically, you could just do, SIS-20, SIS framework, NIST framework, and then, of course, we add HIPAA, but those, and HICCUP is even something you could use. The 405D HICCUP program, anybody could use that. It works the exact same way. It's not about HIPAA.
No, and the reason I went with the 405D, because this is not a healthcare entity, but they were talking about how they, we want to get to the point where we have a whole structured program, but we got to start somewhere. And I was like, well, here you go.
There you go.
Start
Everything
here.
you need. Small.
Yeah, and
Do everything in the small.
And if you can't do the 5, then at least start with the first 2,
Mm-hmm.
which is ransomware and email.
Those are the biggest.
So
Indeed.
Anywho.
So, yeah, and it's one of the things that, we're blending Hiccup into everything that we're doing as well for that reason, which is also why we're going to bring in Eric Decker in a couple of weeks and talk to him about some other things that are going to be happening with the 405D program now that we can get back to doing some work, we hope.
Now that I'm involved, things will be changing.
Oh, good Lord.
All righty.
Yeah.
So that brings us to...
I'll regret going, hey, David wants to join. I'll regret that. I'll regret it. I'm sure.
You probably will.
All right. So this is where we go further in to, we're getting to the point. Promise. This is all going to tie back together in just a minute. I promise. That the Marriott case hit big news, right? They have been... Because Marriott had this massive, 300 and something million people worldwide in this data breach. And it was a multi-year, 4-year data breach. And they're having to deal with all the entities around the world who are like, we're supposed to be protecting our people with these laws. And what happened was, so in this case, in the Marriott case, the way it all started, and this is something that I constantly encourage business leaders to consider, is if you're doing mergers and acquisitions, you must vet each other. Whatever you're doing, you need to vet what's going on, because what happened here is Marriott acquired Starwood. And Starwood did not know that they had a data breach that was actively happening and had been happening for 2 years. Marriott didn't do any kind of forensics or testing on the network because I'm sure, they said, yeah, we're secure. And they put that in with the paperwork. And that was the extent of it. So then Marriott takes them over, and then they don't do immediate testing of their own. And we're talking like 2018, not 2012. We know this stuff's happening right now. 2018, they didn't do any immediate testing, and it wasn't found until things went, way down the path. So I'm sorry, 2018 is when they found it. So 2016 is when they acquired them. It started in 2014. So 4 years, this thing's ongoing. And the only reason they found it is that somebody changed a setting on one of the security monitoring software. They hadn't been monitoring for something, and I don't know whether it was on purpose or what, but somebody added a new setting because they were monitoring all the credit card stuff because that's all they had to worry about. PCI. I'm going to worry about the credit card stuff. And this is what we tell people. You need to worry about everything, not just what PHI is covered under HIPAA. Worry about all your data. You got PCI and HIPAA that worries about credit cards, and PHI, you should worry about everything. So they were monitoring that, and they turned on a monitor that looked at the database as a whole, not just those fields. And when the hacker ran a scan that said, how many are in this, how many records, how many rows are in this table, it picked it up and alerted them. That's the only way they found it. And the article we linked to gives you very good details. And if you're the cyber person or you want to understand how these things work, it's a great article that we have a link to there. And it tells you the steps of what happened. It's pretty interesting how they came in, and they came in through a portal that's used for employees to make requests for changes to the website. That's where it started. And boom. So they've been settling up on all of these across the country. And, again, it has very specific things that if you had done them and continued to do them, it would have happened. And they're like, why weren't you monitoring this in the first place? And everybody's like, it wasn't required. I'm required to look at that. And so it was a much bigger issue. because they weren't going after the individual fields. They were going after everything. And they did get it. A bunch of it.
Yeah.
Well, you got
They got it
4
all.
years. I mean, come on. You're going to get a bonus.
Yeah, I'm freaking out over 4 minutes.
So with that in mind, they were able also to get over into some Marriott stuff, as I understand it. I mean, you start cross-pollinating once you have an acquisition, especially 2 years in. So if you're going to merge, and we in healthcare know that, that happens all the time. I probably would anticipate maybe some more of that. Merges and splits and all of those things in the next year or so, as we all find out what our new economy works like.
Mhm.
But the thing is that you need to be paying attention, and you actually want to evaluate their security program before, because you should be able to make more money if you're going to have to clean up a mess or take on that liability.
Mm-hmm.
And your insurance broker will tell you the same thing.
Yep.
So, but here we go.
Mhm.
We're finally at that point that I promised you we would be at. And this is the part when I sent it to David this week. I don't remember exactly what you said, but it was kind of like I'm ready to throw up.
Yeah. I was like, oh, this is interesting and not good all at the same time.
It makes me very nervous.
Yeah, very.
So one of the things in the Marriott deal is Marriott has, of course, a class action lawsuit against them for the harm, because people immediately had like their identity theft and credit cards taken and all these kind of things. And they finally track it back to Starwood/Marriott. So here's the thing. Accenture is the company that came in and found what was going on and cleaned it up. They were also the ones in charge of, identifying where everything was, blah, blah, blah. But here's the thing. They were also the people in charge of their cybersecurity program. Normally, whatever you find in forensics, then the lawyers expect that forensics report to fall under privilege and not go into legal records in a lawsuit. Because that's the report that says this is how bad it was, right? This is what happened, which is probably why we know all the details. So the court said, because the class action lawsuit came in and said, look, we want to include Accenture because they were responsible for the security. And we want to see that report. And now the court has ruled, you know what? It's not like you just brought them in to do that one thing. They have been contracted with you all along, which is totally different than I brought somebody in to deal with the breach, and then they gave me a report that is under what you would consider privilege with the attorney. So they're saying, Accenture, yeah, line it up. You're in line with Marriott. So you're going to, because you were responsible for outlining and implementing their cyber policies before the breach.
Mm-hmm.
So it's those folks that, well, you didn't tell me to do it. Might want to be paying attention.
Yeah.
And it goes further that, we had the Capital One breach as well. Mm-hmm. So Capital One, it was a firewall thing not set up properly that allowed a rogue AWS employee to really screw things up. We'll just not go into that. But similar kind of thing happening because FireEye Mandiant is the one that came in and evaluated that data breach. And, this is the one where they say that because they had a long-standing relationship, it wasn't just we called you in right now, then, it doesn't fall under privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And they said that the deciding factor in this case was that Capital One Mandiant had already been hired by the company and was doing work related to what happened.
Right.
How I always talk about, we have forensics folks, not just the IT folks, because that's who we call in. But a lot of these companies do sell add-on things. And a lot of times they'll come in to do their forensics and then try to sell you their services to do monitoring and the security piece. Like you and I talk about, there's the IT help desk and then there's security piece.
Mm-hmm.
This is going to make things a little interesting for those people.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. It's,
you still can't talk about it, can you?
This is one of the ones where I'm like, I mean, I just don't know. Cause you're putting liability on people, on consulting firms, you know, because they consulted.
Yep.
It's like, wow. You know, and I think of these smaller IT firms that often are asked to consult on things they know little about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not necessarily their fault, except for they need to understand what they don't understand. So they can say, not my forte, you have to get somebody else to do it.
Yeah, you don't know what you don't know.
Right. Because oftentimes, you know, as a IT business, you don't want to say, I can't do it, or you're going to have to look at another IT business that might be able to do it because you're scared you might lose the client. And so you tend to say, yeah, let me look into it, or I'll investigate it to as much degree as I can investigate it. And then you just kind of go from there.
Yes. So that was the point that they were interviewing an attorney about the impact of this, that you needed to make sure that whoever did the forensics on your data breach limits their scope to the facts of the data breach.
Yeah. It's like, oh yeah, we looked at your data breach, but we also noticed that you don't have this over here. And so we need to sell you that too.
Right.
Which we all do that in my field because you're already in there. Why wouldn't you recommend the other stuff you're finding as well?
Yeah. So there's going to be a little bit of that. And they also said that paying post-breach consultants from the company's legal budget as opposed to the general ledger, you know, those kind of things, so that it's not a routine business expense, you know. And so even with what I do, I'm trying to figure out, you know, exactly how does this apply to me? I don't implement, you know, we give you the things that we recommend and we make it clear, you know, that you are responsible for implementing these things. That's why I won't take on, I am your remote compliance officer. You know, because that embeds me in your company. I'm no longer a consultant with an independent opinion. And so I'm going to give you an evaluation of what you're doing and what you should do. And I'm not going to be able to be the one that actually implements it. But also on the flip side, I have to help in the breach. So this is stuff that's really going to get very, very specific, and you got to look for, there's going to have to have things happen because everybody's going to want to know every single detail. The bigger these breaches get, or the more personal they become, which is in healthcare, they are personal. And don't think that because these cases have nothing to do with healthcare and they're big companies that a legal action will not be referenced.
Yeah.
They definitely will be. So that's why David and I are both kind of like, things that make you say,
Yeah, it's definitely going to be something to watch because to echo the quote of I think it was Matt Hamilton in the article. He said the last thing you want to do is disincentivize. The last thing you want to do is disincentivize good cybersecurity practices.
Yeah, that was a tough word to get out. I worked on it and gave up. I'm glad you went for it.
Desensitized.
It's one thing to write it down. It's another thing to get that out.
Right? Yeah. Slap somebody. How about that?
But yeah, you don't want people to stop doing cybersecurity because if I have those people, they're going to have to rat me out in a lawsuit. It's a vicious loop we are getting in there. So there's going to have to be a certain amount of, I don't know, legislation, or I don't know how it's going to work out. The attorneys are going to work it out, the legal folks. I'm just trying to figure out how to protect information the best I can. And that's all we can focus on. But it also means don't overstep your boundaries. And that's something that we say over and over and over again. Just because you think you know does not mean you know.
Right.
And, I tell people I do not know everything. I do know that what I am talking about, I do understand it, or I'm not going to tell you.
Mm-hmm.
So, which brings us to the healthcare part of this, because vendors are very, very embedded in healthcare entities. And there's news that just came out, and everyone that's a healthcare vendor should definitely be paying attention to this one. And it is one of those patient right to access initiatives. We just talked about all those cases, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is rolling even further. And there is a class action suit that's against the hospital, Health Alliance, and its medical records management provider, Ciox. It's the biggest name in medical records management provider. And, there's much smaller companies that you may want to be considering right now. But anyway, engaged in a pattern of information blocking by refusing to provide medical records to the plaintiff widow who sought the records for the purpose of a potential wrongful death malpractice claim.
Wow.
Yeah, this is getting a little tricky, right?
Mm-hmm.
These actions include refusing to provide any electronic health records, charging an excessive amount for paper records they were willing to provide, and for being intentionally unresponsive and obstructionist in their dealing with the plaintiff.
Wow. Nothing says I'm guilty like those things.
Right. So this case happened, and they've actually found other people where similar things happen, and they're wanting to certify a class action to bring in thousands of potential other members.
Mm. Yeah, this would get nasty.
Yeah. But the important thing that ties in perfectly with what we just said is the vendor is included in the lawsuit.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the vendor may have been acting on the direction of the hospital or on their own, or it was a wink, wink, nudge, nudge kind of thing. Who knows? No way to know exactly what happened. It'll all come out in court one way or another. But as a vendor, I'm paying attention that this could happen.
Mm-hmm.
Which also brings up the phrase information blocking, which is a new thing. It is not part of HIPAA, but I got a funny email last week before, from a group I work with. We're planning sessions for next year's conference, and somebody said something about information blocking. Is that you? Is that what you do? Well, no, it doesn't fall under HIPAA, but it does fall under patient right of access.
Right.
And it's part of 21st Century Cures Act. And for that reason, we're going to be bringing that under, what we do. I'm not going to draw that line and say, nope, not HIPAA, I'm not doing it.
Mm-hmm.
We don't do that already. So with that in mind, coming to an episode near you,
Information blocking.
We will be sharing a discussion about it soon. And it's gone back and forth about what's effective, when is it effective. The enforcement is being changed. There's different parts of it. There's all these things moving around. And there's so much enforcement discretion also happening right now that I haven't made it a top priority because we're under such attacks with cybersecurity issues, and let's handle the HIPAA patient right of access, and then let's get to information blocking. And so far, time's running out. We're going to have to start dealing with that.
Right.
So we'll be doing one soon.
Well, I guess if you don't respond to OCR, that's information blocking.
One could call it that, but once you review some of this information blocking things, you can see how they didn't even bring HIPAA into play.
Mm-hmm.
Patient right of access is under HIPAA and high tech. That's where those laws are, but they also bring in information blocking, and there's a reason you're going to start hearing more and more about that, because it's some very specific stuff. There's like 8 exceptions, but you've got to document like crazy that you fall under those exceptions. And again, this is going to have a lot to do with your vendor and the vendor you choose to use.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I guess if you're a vendor, you probably should be paying attention to this so that if your client says, don't give somebody information, you can say, we need to have a discussion about this.
Yeah. I mean, you're in a tough spot. You're in a really tough spot.
I'm not going to get wrapped up in your mess.
Well, I mean, you think about it, that when your IT people are told, you know, if the IT folks nuke and pave and tell you you're okay, it's on them. But if I tell them after a ransomware attack, I just want you to make it better and don't tell anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Now you're in a tough spot.
Yeah. Yeah. Because this is where, you know, we fall into this sometimes where a client will say, remove the security or, you know, get rid of the passwords. And we have a document that we say, you know, sign this document that releases us from all liability, and that, you know, anything that comes out of this, we're going to charge you for it.
Mm-hmm.
However, will that stand in court? I don't know. Never been tried. I do know that people have had cases where they had a client sign something that released them from liability and they still were found liable. So just having the document signed doesn't protect you. And that's part of what scares me, because, you know, you don't want to get into a situation where you and your client are butting heads over something.
Right.
But at the same time, it's like, look, I'm trying to protect you. I'm also trying to protect me. You're not playing the game here. So I'm going to have to either cut you loose as a client, which, you know, there again, you're talking about dropping revenue for somebody. That's hard to do. Or we got to come to a better decision than this, because this is not going to cut it.
Yeah. Those that don't, you know, have to sign paychecks, they're like, oh, well, you can't do everything for money. Oh, you're going to tell the tech I got to fire? You know, you're going to tell them that I shouldn't, you know, I got to take the high road, but sorry, you got to take the low road. See you, bye.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's a very, very complicated position, especially for small businesses. You know?
Sure is.
So, but anyway, there you go. We've brought it all back around to vendors in these breach lawsuits, and healthcare does matter. Yeah. They need to be paying attention. Always
a lot to continue to pay attention to. And sometimes these episodes are uncomfortable even for us to listen to. It's like, I don't want them to come after me.
I know. I don't know. You know, it's a lot of the whole, you know, I don't want to be the one that, you know, do as I say, not as I do. Yeah. I am never a fan of that. I wasn't a fan of it as a child either.
Yeah. There's so many vendors that run around out there, though. Like, I sent you a picture the other day as a guy that I don't know what he was on Facebook or whatever, had a shirt on. He's like, I have 99 things to worry about, and breaches aren't one of them. And I'm like, you should be. You should be very, very worried. And I know his point. His point was that whatever he was pushing,
right,
you know, would solve the breach problem, whatever.
Right, yeah.
You know, but as soon as I saw that, I'm like, dude, I would never hire somebody that has that attitude toward breaches.
Well, we've said that over and over. If the vendor tells you, you don't ever have to worry about ransomware if you buy this.
Right.
You don't have to worry about security. You don't have to worry about security at all if you hire us. Then there's some concern, because every business owner should be worrying about security.
Yeah. Don't worry about your HIPAA. We got it. We're doing your HIPAA for you. No.
All you got to do is.
Yeah. All you got to do is, here, just follow this checklist from the SBA. All right, folks, that is our show for today. Remember to follow us and share us out on your favorite social media, and rate our podcasting out. Leave a review. We still love reviews.
Need them.
So
we need them.
Do that. Yep, absolutely. So remember, for Donna and myself, HIPAA, it's not about compliance. It's about patient care.
You've been listening to the Help Me with HIPAA podcast, hosted by Donna Grindle and David Sims. The show created to help you with HIPAA. For more information or to ask us a question, visit our website at helpmewithhipaa.com. Neither Donna Grindle or David Sims are attorneys, and they do not offer binding legal advice concerning regulatory compliance. The information in this podcast should not be relied upon or construed as legal advice in any way. Consult your attorney for legal advice concerning compliance with HIPAA regulations.